sa tobom se narodi ponose, sa tobom se narodi ponose. Druže, druže, Tito, ljubičice plava, druže, druže, Tito, ljubičice plava, ti se boriš za...
On the 25th of May, we celebrate Tito's birthday, which is only the starting point for a greater celebration, a celebration of the eternal youth of our country.
This year we do not only celebrate Marshal Tito's 85th birthday, but we also pay deep respect to Tito, the man who has become the symbol of our freedom, brotherhood and unity of all the nations and nationalities of Yugoslavia.
You and I are just the same, a tiny part of this free country connected with the name of our great leader Tito. We are bound together by innumerable, unbreakable ties.
Our youth is Tito.
Our past is Tito.
Our present and future is Tito.
Hello. As you see, we are celebrating the 25th of May today, and some pupils from Radio Jovčeski Korjagin High School have come along to tell me more about the celebrations, the history of Yugoslavia, and Marshal Tito. They will also be reciting some poems for you and singing a song which they have composed themselves. Their English teacher, Mrs. Vera Čapovska, has prepared them with all the English words that they need, and we would like to thank her very much for all the work she has done to make this program possible. We would also like to thank Mrs. Frosina Cornetti. Well, the first thing I would like to know is why May the 25th is celebrated as Youth Day. Can you tell me, Mare?
Tito is a symbol of the youth of Yugoslavia, and so his birthday is celebrated as Youth Day.
How is the young people's love and respect for Tito manifested on that day?
Through the baton which the best young person gives to Tito on 25th of May. Before it is presented, it has been carried throughout Yugoslavia, from region to region, from hand to hand, with the one wish of long live Tito.
How is the young person chosen who presents the baton to Tito?
Well, each year he comes from a different republic or autonomous province, and he is either a student or a worker. And he is chosen as the best among all his fellows.
We were born in a joy and happiness, aware of the glorious and bitter past and the glorious and better tomorrow. The man who's gone through pain and torture has led our fathers and grandfathers, our aunts and uncles, our mothers and grandmothers into the war towards victory and freedom. And thence comes our happiness, and we rejoice, Tito, Tito, Tito. The man whose goal through pressures and decisions has taught our fathers and grandfathers, our aunts and uncles, our mothers and grandmothers, you and me, how to keep and cherish the welfare of the country. Thence comes our happiness, and we rejoice, Tito, Tito, Tito. The man who's become the world traveler for peace has taught you and me how to be just, industrious and brave, how to rejoice, and thence comes our happiness.
Well as the joy and happiness that young people may feel in their country, their past and their future, we also heard something in that poem about pain and torture. To achieve freedom and happiness for their children, many people died in the Second World War and did not live to see the freedom which they fought for. We should remember some of those people today. Vesna, can you tell me about one of those great lessons of history?
There is the terrible story of what happened in Kragujevac in Serbia on the 21st of October 1941.
Yes, the German occupying army took all the adult men in the town, as well as 300 youths from the local high school.
There were 15 boys under the age of 12. Altogether, there were 7,000 people, and they were all shot dead on that one day.
It is something which will never be forgotten, and it is also a kind of appeal for peace. Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous French writer and philosopher, visited Kragujevac and wrote, "The strongest impression a foreigner can carry away from a country is of the suffering that is felt in that country. That is what I experienced at Kragujevac. Whenever Yugoslavia is mentioned, I will always remember Kragujevac. I will remember the heroism of an entire nation.
Jasenovac is another terrible memorial and lesson for all mankind. That's where Ustashi set up a concentration camp on the model of their Nazi masters.
Over a period of 4 years, more than 700,000 Yugoslavs were murdered there in horrible ways. It was terrible sacrifice of lives and yet proved that in the end life is still indestructible.
What about Sutjeska too? We mustn't forget what happened there. 127,000 enemy soldiers surrounded 19,600 partisans, including 4,000 wounded and their supreme commander Tito.
But the partisans managed through superhuman efforts to break through the enemy forces and escape.
Tito said about this, Sutjeska will always remind our people of the high price we paid for what we have achieved.
I know there are many more stories to tell about the war, but I would like to hear some more about President Tito now. I know very little about his early life. I know Tito is 85 this year, and I know then he must have been born in 1892. But where was he born, Vesna?
He was born in the village of Kumrovec, Croatia. His family were poor peasants.
He trained to be a metal worker and locksmith and joined the trade unions and Socialist Party.
He was called just Josip Broz then, of course, and he worked first in Zagreb and then in various factories in Slovenia, Czechoslovakia, Germany and Wien.
When the First World War started, he had to join the 25th Croatian Regiment of the Austro-Hungarian Army.
Yes, of course. Croatia was part of Austria-Hungary then, wasn't it?
That's right, but Josip Broz spent his time in the army usefully as he spread anti-war propaganda and even spent a short time in military prison for that.
Then he was badly wounded, though, and taken prisoners by the Russians, spending some time in hospital Gamber.
But he was transferred to a prisoner of war camp and got to know about the Russian workers' movement. He began an active struggle for the POW's rights, and when the revolution of February 1917 came, he escaped from the camp and became a member of the Bolshevik Party.
When did he return to Yugoslavia?
In 1920, he found a job in Zagreb and joined the workers' revolutionary movement.
That must have been dangerous at the time.
Yes, as an active member of the party, he was continuously persecuted by the police as the party was illegal.
Well, in fact, he was in prison for 5 years in 1928 for his political activity. At his trial, he behaved with real dignity and contempt towards his accusers.
5 years is a long time in prison. What happened when Josip Broz was released?
He was exiled to his native village, but he soon returned to Zagreb illegally and continued his political activity under the name of Tito.
He must have been an important member of the party by this time.
He was elected as a member of the Central Committee in 1934. Then he left for Moscow the following year, where he worked in the Balkan section of the Comintern.
When did he return to Yugoslavia this time?
In 1936, he was then an organizational secretary of the Central Committee, and he lost no time in organizing intensive revolutionary activity.
What kind of revolutionary activity was going on at that time?
The youth and trade union movements were organized and volunteers were secretly sent to fight in the Spanish Civil War.
When did Tito become leader of the party?
In 1937, he was elected leader and formed the Central Committee, also strengthening the party's political independence.
Under Tito's leadership, the party, though it was still banned, encouraged a strong anti-fascist movement among the broadest masses of the people in these years just before the Second World War.
When was Yugoslavia attacked in the war?
On April the 6th, 1941, the government just fled and the army surrendered in a few days, but Tito immediately began organizing the liberation struggle.
He became chief of the supreme headquarters of the People's Liberation Army and devised and worked out of the tactics of partisan warfare.
Yes, that was a new and very effective way of fighting. Notice in English that we say tactics and politics, both in the plural. Tactics and politics. Both words are used in the plural in English. Tito's leadership during the war was an inspiration to many, including artists. Many poems have been written about his role in the National Liberation War. Vesna will now give us an example of one of those poems.
Here is part of Vladimir Nazor's poem Forward Tito, translated into English. Tito rides at the front of the column along the narrow, mountainous path. High on the top, ice, stone and mud all around. A muddy stream roars down in the canyon, and dark clouds swirl on the sky. A streak of fog rises like smoke over woods of pines, beeches and firs. He rides unaware of all this. Where has thought transported him? Into what world? What are the wrinkles on his forehead and his tightly drawn lips? But all of a sudden he stops. He starts. He sees a ghost frozen with mud, with ice and snow. It stands, spreading cold around, and says, "Where are you going, you daredevil? I am the master in this wood." Tito's eyes glint, and blazing fires pour from his eyes. He strikes his horse, tramples the beast, and cries from the heights, "Forward!"
After the war, Yugoslavia was a devastated country, but it was reconstructed under Tito's leadership, and the new government and socialist system were gradually strengthened and developed. But I have heard that Tito said, "I have had some difficult times in my life, but 1948 was the most difficult." Why did he say that?
In 1948, he saved the achievements of the revolution and the independence of Yugoslavia. In that year, he gave his historic note to the resolution of the Inform Bureau. Standing up to Stalin, Tito was backed by the whole Yugoslav nation.
So from that time, Yugoslavia developed independently. When was the system of self-management introduced?
The system of work self-management was introduced in the enterprises in 1950, and it later developed into social self-management.
Self-management is the Yugoslav system of self-government. Tito not only started the system of self-management in Yugoslavia, but also an international policy which involves many countries all over the world. This is called the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement is the association of countries which are not linked with any of the world power blocks.
Tito has said that today the non-aligned countries are the principal champions of equal relations, relations free of discrimination and interference in the internal affairs of others.
Tito organized the first conference of non-aligned, and he still plays a leading role in the development of the movement.
But peace can't be divided from security in the world today, and so Tito has put forward the idea of total national defense.
On December the 21st last year, Tito was awarded the first doctor's degree in military science in Yugoslavia. He explained his concept of defense very clearly on that occasion.
Tito said, "Our defense forces are intended exclusively for defensive purposes, their task being formulated most aptly by the well-known watchword. We do not want what belongs to the others, we'll never give up what's ours."
Tito also said that we have won freedom and independence by our own struggle, and that by following our own path we have created and developed our system of socialist self-management, and will therefore never allow anyone to threaten these greatest achievements of our struggle and creative efforts of our people.
There is another great achievement of Tito's, which we haven't mentioned yet, that is his great role in uniting all the Yugoslav peoples and other nationalities in Yugoslavia, in realizing the eternal dream to be equal, to be free, to communicate with each other, to live in concord and happiness.
Today we can be confident in our future because Tito has told us many times that everything depends on us to maintain the brotherhood and unity of the nation and nationalities of Yugoslavia.
Well, from everything you have told me today, it is obvious that Tito is not only a great leader and politician, but also an international statesman. But perhaps to end our program today, it would be nice to hear something about Tito the man. Can you tell us any little anecdotes about Tito's personal life?
Yes, here is a story I like about Tito's English. In 1938, Tito was returning from France to Russia. He had a Canadian passport and his name was Spiridon Mekas. In Copenhagen, the Canadian passport was very carefully examined by a policeman. Probably he suspected something. Suddenly he asked Tito something in English. At that time Tito's English was very poor because he had just started to learn it. Fortunately the policeman was a very good man because he only smiled and said, "Listen friend, if you want to travel around the world with this passport, you better learn English, otherwise it must be very dangerous." "Thank you, yes," Tito said gratefully, winking at the policeman.
That's a good story, thank you, Emil. Has anybody else heard any anecdotes about Tito?
Here is one in which we can see how subtle Tito's humor can be. In November 1971, Tito paid a visit to Canada. Then a journalist asked him who was going to be acting for him while he was away. "I don't know, at the moment they are shooting a film about Sutjeska and Richard Burton is acting for me there," Tito answered. "I don't know, he may be acting for me later on as well."
I like this anecdote best. It's about Tito and Churchill. They met first in Naples. 9 years later, Tito was invited to visit Great Britain. On the way to number 10 Downing Street, Churchill said, "I was very angry with you about Trieste and your sharp words." Tito smiled and asked, "Are you still angry?" "No, I like you now," Churchill said.
Well, to finish our program today, we are going to hear a song which has been written and set to music by some pupils from the school. It's very appropriate for Youth Day as it's about the ideals and desires of young people. It's called My Generation.
Sometimes or always, my generation, there is a question hanging over me. Does this life mean something to you? And what do you really wanna be? Are you vicious as modest as mine? You know they say that life is very strange. Do you want a quiet, peaceful kind of life? Or you want adventures and everyday change? An ordinary life and only one woman? Do you really think that it is good for us? And my ideals, what will happen to them when days of youth has passed? Sometimes or always, my generation, there is a question hanging over me. Does this life mean something to you? And what do you really wanna be? Are you vicious as modest as mine? You know they say that life is very strange. Do you want a quiet, peaceful kind of life? Or you want adventures and everyday change? An ordinary life and only one woman? Do you really think that it is good for us? And my ideals, what will happen to them when days of youth has passed?
Let us sum up all we have been seeing today in the words of Stane Dolans, Secretary of the Executive Committee of the Presidency of the Central Committee of the Yugoslav Communist Party. He said, "Tito doesn't just belong to us, but to the whole world."
Hey! sa tobom se narodi ponose, zato